Welcome to, geez, this episode 90, boys. I think if we release it that way, we've got an incredible guest from the US, David Thompson. And I reached out to David probably about a year ago, and we've been in conversation the entire time. He's a very busy man and a very skilled man and a very highly revered man in the US community. And I think I first heard about David through a client who's since become a really good friend of mine, Caroline Chang. And she'd reached out to David, I think, years ago and done a lot of really deep sort of mentoring work and curation work with the galleries. And I started building up this picture about David actually through somebody else's eyes about who he was and what he's capable of doing. And since then, I've sort of recognized, he's quite a revered figure in the wider community, the US in particular, and even around the world. And one of the things I think that really stands out about David, he's a very deeply considered visual artist, in that he puts a lot of time and thought and consideration into the release of his work and the curation of his work and the narrative behind his work and the comprehensive kind of cohesiveness of how he produces his work and the intentionality around it. And we're going to get a very, very privileged insight tonight. He's already told us that there's some work here that he hasn't even shown to anybody, even the Comstomps crew. So that's good. So let's drop that in. So Nick and Luke and I have been pretty excited about this. Nick was like, "There's no way you're running the show without me on it," and Nick's our busiest kind of member, so we've built it all around so we could all be here and get a very privileged opportunity to delve into David's kind of the narrative of his life and the way he works as an artist, and we're pretty excited to have you, brother. So thank you for putting the family aside and everything else for a beautiful little window for us. Thank you.
Man, I appreciate that. I mean, that intro, what am I supposed to do with an intro like that? I mean, that's like the intro of all time.
So cheese.
Paul's got away with words, that's for sure.
I mean, we might as well just go on and wrap this up right now. I mean, I got that.
Just put the link to the website and we'll go away and have breakfast.
Yeah. Let's call it a day. Too funny.
Credit where credit's due, brother. I don't mind giving credit where credit's due. And I got a few clues about what's out there in the world after shooting for 30 years, and your work stands out among some of the most beautiful in the world for all of the reasons that I explained above in particular really come through. And that is not necessarily that common in a lot of the way people present their work and navigate their work in the digital world. And it's very, very clear with yours. And that's something I've been very excited to delve into, that process behind it, the kind of man behind the myth.
Like I said, the mystery man when we were talking. But yeah, I appreciate that. I really appreciate the kind words. It's been a very long and challenging journey, I'll say that, but very rewardful in many ways. This medium of photography has helped me grow in so many different ways. It's not even funny. I would have never thought, when I first got my first camera, which was film, and I've said it before, I was horribly bad at film. Couldn't take an exposure, couldn't, do a composition, blown out images, didn't know about metering, didn't know anything about lighting, none of that, none of that stuff. And to see where I was at then to where I'm at now is just like, it's a miracle. To be perfectly honest with you, it's a miracle I even came that far. I think most people would have probably given up a long time ago, but
what's that sort of time frame if you were going to give a picture to then and now? Like, what are we talking about?
So my first film camera I had was a Pentax Z7. I think I had that camera in 2000, probably like the late 90s, maybe 2000, 1999, early 2000. The only reason why I remember that is because September 11th. I remember my daughter was around 3 years old at the time, and we were like literally at the World Trade Center like 2 weeks before it happened. And I had a film camera, and I was able to just take this picture of the World Trade Center, just straight up, line, blue sky, nothing serious or anything like that. But here it is, 2 weeks later, we have this massive event that happened here, and I have a picture of that, right? So that's kind of where stuff kind of took off. And I just got lucky with that picture, but I wanted to learn more, right? And during that process, it was just the constant struggle. Then once digital came around, everything changed. Everything is instant, right? So we can look at those pictures right away and, make adjustments and that kind of thing. But even then, it just wasn't all the way where it needed to be. And that took a lot of time to, I guess, get your vision and your voice. And once I got that, then it just kind of took off, from there. And that's kind of where we're at now.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's one of the great threads I think that filters through your work, David, is there's definitely a sense of vision and intentionality around your work, and both in the individual images and the wider sort of galleries you sort of release at the same time. Like that's probably a tricky conversation to start with, but a good one. Like where is that thread sort of come from? Where is the drive that brought you from, the Pentax years 23 years ago to now, in terms of, is there a thread that's run all the way through? Has that changed a lot over time? Is it slowly crystallizing and still figuring out, like as an artist, where are you at in your sort of journey?
It's all of that. It's all of that, Paul. I think early on, when the film days, during that time, there wasn't a whole lot of, what can I say? We had magazines, right? So anything we had to look at was like either National Geographic or maybe Outdoor Photographer, at that time. Later on, once we started getting into digital, we had like Pop Photo, digital photography, a lot of stuff that came out of the UK. But here, based in the US, if anything that we wanted to look at in terms of imagery, we had to go to the library. We had to actually buy books, right? So that's where a lot of my journey started, was going to the library with stacks of books and magazines, just trying to figure out, how to work my camera, what to look for. How do you know what to look for if you don't know, right? So you start buying all these books on composition and try to figure out, what direction you want to go with this photography stuff. And, during that time, you're still finding yourself. I'm a young man. I'm in my, late teens, early 20s. You're looking at the world completely different than, what you're looking at 20 something years, now. And I have an idea of what I wanted to do early on when I started with digital, because once we got the internet, right, and we started having social media sharing sites such as Flickr. And I remember when I first got my digital camera, the lady that did my wife and I's wedding, I told her I wanted to get into photography, and she said, "Well, what do you want to shoot?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Okay, go to Flickr. There's thousands of images over there. Go to Flickr. There's thousands of images over there, and then pick something." I was like, okay. So I go to Flickr, and she was right. There's thousands of images, portraits, still life. Everybody at that time was early on HDR and stuff like that, right? Mm. So then I remember coming across seascapes, and the seascape stuff was like amazing to me because, I like to travel and that kind of thing. So that was something that I could relate to, seeing these beautiful sunsets and these beautiful sunrises. That was something I could relate to because I saw that all the time. And the images that I saw that were of high quality didn't seem obtainable to me. That was just like so far away from reality. Like I was just like blown away. Like there's no way if I get a camera that I will be able to get there. Well, what I didn't know is that it was just more than just the capture, right? Of actually researching, being there, camera settings, vision. So all of that was not even a thing to me. But then as the years went on and I slowly started to pick up these things as I got into the field, then it started becoming more apparent. The vision starts to get a lot clearer. And again, it's being persistent, willing to accept failures. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I failed a lot. My failure rate was very, very, very high. But, over time, I accepted those failures, right? And once I accepted those failures and I started to grow from that, that's when, everything started to take off. And then another thing that I'm gonna, make really clear, that I think is different from me from a lot of the photographers that are, shooting these days, is there was no thought of making money at photography. It was just, I just wanted to do it. I just wanted to be good at making images. That was just my whole goal. As long as I can be good at making images, awesome. That was my main goal. Once I started being able to make the images that I wanted to, and they got to a level to where I can start sharing them and, getting feedback, and the feedback, believe me, at the very beginning was awful. It was bad. It wasn't great at all, which is fine because I needed that. And once I got that feedback and started, building off of that feedback and started producing the images that I wanted to make, then it started going into, let's get into the body of work. How can we do something a little bit different? The stuff that I do with my work now, sharing them as a body of work, this is something I've been doing for years before even a lot of people even thought of this. I think maybe at the time, maybe 2 or 3 artists were doing this, but now it seems like, it's the thing to do, which is cool. I think it's cool. I think that takes a lot of dedication. It improves your work, and the thought process to go behind that and have the patience to put all that together is big. And it's really important. So I'm a big, huge fan and proponent of, sharing your work as a large body of work as to, an image here and there, which there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it's the viewing experience. I've always enjoyed seeing those large body of works like yourself, Paul, seeing those nice big bodies of work, multiple images, of different areas, and seeing the diversity and the colors and the textures and different compositions. That's intriguing to me. And, I think that anybody that's willing to go that route is also saying something big about their work and about their vision and about their art. Wow, I think that was a long drive.
Yeah, that's like a book intro right there, brother. I had a few things to jump in with, and I'm like, I am not jumping into the flow of that. That is just magic rolling off the tongue there. But
sorry about that, guys. I'll just don't
be sorry.
No, that's gold. That's like liquid gold on the screen.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, don't even dare apologize for I mean, how many artists do I know who have the capacity to condense 23 years of their life like that, and turn to the intensity and purpose around their work? Not many, my friends. So that was pretty profound.
That's a shorter version, obviously, but there's a lot that has gone into that. As I was saying, I'm a young man when I first picked up my camera. I've had children, I've grown, I've seen the world differently, right? Social events that happen, within my community, stuff that's happened to me personally, life, losing my parents, like a year after each other, that completely, changes your thought process on how you move, in your regular day life, right? And for me, my photography is an extension of my life, right? So with me moving differently, with my parents being gone, that's going to affect my vision. That's going to affect my art in some kind of way, whether it be subconsciously or consciously, looking for something maybe more subtle to find peace with certain things, right? Or maybe something dramatic and moody because I'm still dealing with emotions of losing my parents. All of that affects how I see the world, how my art is displayed, how I capture, the landscape out there. The landscape, speaks to us in different ways, right? And, with my camera, it's just me capturing that language and, events in life and, just general stuff, everyday living, completely changes that. What I shoot, what I shot, 10 years ago, I may not even shoot the same thing now. You know what I mean? When I first started, I was into these big, wide, grand landscapes. Like I told you, shooting these seascapes. The reality of what I was seeing, in these magazines and these books, you see these big epic skies. And the reality of that is you don't see that often, right? So
except if you're in a Walmart car park, apparently.
well, that
That's
seems
all the time.
right. That's the time when you see the best light is when you're working or at Walmart or, for me, daddy daycare duties and that kind of thing. But, when it came to getting out and getting those kind of conditions, it was, kind of iffy. But do I just chase light all the time and looking for those kind of conditions and not being able to, express myself through my imagery? No. So, I have to switch that up. So then I start shooting smaller scenes. I start, exploring, areas that I wouldn't normally explore, or, start shooting with the drone, looking at the landscape a completely different way. So, all of this stuff during, these 20 plus years, you're evolving, you're completely changing. And for me, I'm still continue to grow. So I'm still growing and, I'm still evolving and, still trying to figure it out. And, that's what I like. I like that, and who knows when it's all said and done, until I can't move anymore, or just absolutely can't walk or something like that. Or even if I fall off the face of the earth, I know that I'm still growing, I'm still evolving. And I think that I still have a lot to give, with my work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was just thinking that when we start losing our physical capacities, by the time we do, there'll be technologies where you can take photographs with the glasses you're wearing or different things that get around, the physical limitations that we have. It's probably a lot more holographic and three-dimensional sort of work. It is, like I've been around long enough that I started in film as well. And I was stumbling around on my own in the dark and had no influences and no mentors and no teachers. And I just was just doing my own thing for years. And the amount of stuff that's sitting under my bed upstairs of boxes of film and slide work that I'd probably never even get out and look at. I almost got rid of it the other day. And then a friend of mine's like, no, you can't. And I'm like, we'll see, but it's still there. But I think what I was curious to ask, David, like you hinted at one of your earlier photographs being almost like a photojournalistic image in a city. So that what you present to the world is largely through the filter of the natural world. Did you have a time where you experimented in other genres? Do you have a living relationship with other sort of styles of work, and that's just what you present to the world, or is it really kind of filtered down to this more purist kind of landscape orientated motivation?
Yeah, I think it just really comes down to the landscape. I tried the like the cityscape stuff, and it didn't feel right. It just, I guess for me too, is that I work in an urban environment with my daily job, and I see, the best and worst of people. I'll just say that. And with the natural landscape or just landscape in itself, let's just forget about the camera aspect of it. Just say nature, right? When I get out into nature, I can disconnect from all of that, so I don't see the bad in people, the bad in people, I can disconnect from all of that, and I can just be hiking, in the middle of the desert by myself, and I don't have to worry about cars whizzing by, honking, fire trucks, ambulances, police, whatever. I can get away from all of that. And it just felt right to me, right? So with the camera, that just kind of enhances all of that and gives me more time and the capacity to disconnect from all of that. So, to answer your question, no, I haven't really experimented anything else because I just don't have that same connection. I've done weddings. Weddings were cool, but again, it's people telling me what to do. I don't like this side. I don't like that side. Can you change light? Can you clone this out? Oh, I don't like this. I don't like this angle. The landscape doesn't speak like that, right? The language is completely different. So I like more of a quiet vibe and atmosphere because that's just kind of how I am. I'm like in the middle. I can be very social, but then at times I want to be that introverted person to get away from everybody. I don't want to hear anybody talking to me. So, I can float on both sides of that spectrum. And I just think that the landscape is that perfect perfect place for me.
That's a very that's a very similar experience to how I see things, David, and it's nice to hear. It's very healing, and a lot of people say it. Oh, you know, it's their chance to heal and to get away from, you know, the nasty aspects of life, and I too tried weddings and that sort of thing, and I had exactly the same sort of issues that you did. They just but you know, a tree doesn't talk back to you. You know, the beach talks to you, but it doesn't talk to you in the same sort of language, and it certainly doesn't try and argue with you.
Right.
And it's really nice to hear.
Well, I was thinking the relativity of where you live, David. Sorry if I'm interrupting you, Nick. In terms of that wider conversation. So for the audience probably doesn't know, but David lives in Las Vegas, which to me is one of the most intensely unusual places I've been in the world in terms of where it's situated, the actual phenomenal kind of conversation around the best and worst of humanity that exists in that city. The way it kind of exists almost in a vacuum in a larger space of what is really quite intense desert country, with limited or no resources of its own, that it just, and historically how it got created to even be there is a show unto itself. And I'm not quite sure how you ended up there or where you're from originally, but it'd be interesting to maybe talk about that step, and also how the positioning of and you already alluded to it already, and from a cultural point of view, what you see in your daily life in that space and what's around you, because it also is a central point to some of the most incredible wilderness areas in the world. Once you sort of stretch wider from this crazy, colossal, kind of global, iconic kind of representation of some very interesting parts of humanity.
So where it all started, so my mother and father, they were both in the military. Believe it or not, I was born here. Both my parents are from back east, New York. So they decided they wanted to join the military. They ended up here in Vegas, and here I am, into this beautiful earth that we have. And then we got stationed into New Mexico, which was, it was cool there too. Was there for a good chunk of my life. Would go back and forth back east, because my parents are from New York, and, all my relatives are there, cousins, uncles, aunts, grandma, grandpa, all that good stuff. So I was fortunate enough to get the best of both worlds, small town living, big city. So, did that for, I can't even tell you, like, years. And then my mom, out of the blue, said she wanted to retire in Las Vegas, out of all places. I wasn't expecting that, but she said she wanted to retire in Vegas. So this is where we ended up coming back to, and it's been home. It's been home since. It's interesting. It's a very interesting place, as you say. But the thing is like, I love this city. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on here, but again, once you get away from all of that stuff down there, it's, we were talking about it earlier, I think before you came on, it's just normal living, just people just going to work every day, trying to make a living and, just live their lives. And I like that aspect of it. Now, when it comes to landscape photography, it's great. I mean, we have so much stuff in either direction. I can go, 2.5 hours north and I'll be in Zion. I can go, from my house now, 1 hour and 50 minutes, I'll be in Death Valley. I can go another, 2 hours and some change, almost 3 hours, and be in the Eastern Sierras, doing stuff over there. I can go south, to the coast. Any direction I can go, there's plenty of stuff. But the other nice thing though, too, is that since Vegas is a central hub for a lot of the airlines, we have a lot of cheap airfare that leaves out of Vegas. So, that's another reason why I'm able to, move around, nicely, because of, we have a lot of options to go anywhere in the US for reasonably priced.
Yeah, having spent a bit of time there myself and around that area, it's strangely enough, one of the best locations I've come across in the world for access to the kind of things that I'm personally drawn to, you know, and I think I was kind of wondering about your life kind of work balance and your family balance and the time for your art. Like, and I think you position yourself in a place in the world that gives you as good a capacity as you're possibly going to get probably anywhere, at least in the States, for example. And
Sure.
so it's making more sense the more I kind of, when I think about, you know, the limited time windows you probably have.
Yeah.
I don't know, where does it work? Where does your artistic work come in? Do you have to have targeted pockets of time that you negotiate to get away? Do you get away regularly anyway? How does it kind of work?
I like that. I like how you put negotiate in there. You know, well, see, for me,
Wasn't
I've been
born yesterday,
blessed. For me, I've been blessed. So, my wife Kim, she's awesome. I met an angel with her. Like, I mean, when we first met, you know, we both did a lot of traveling, you know, prior to us, you know, meeting each other. So when we met, you know, traveling for us was just a natural thing, right? So there was no like, okay, since we're together, I'm not going to stop what you do. I'm not going to stop what you do. Let's just be considerate of each other's traveling and stuff that we like to do, that's easy. That's an easy compromise, right? And we travel together quite a bit, but then we travel solo, you know, often too. In fact, my wife is gone now. She's, you know, with girlfriends traveling, you know, right now. But there's, you know, I guess like you say, that compromise, right? But with that being said, you know, I set the groundwork very early on. I'm into photography. I like to take pictures. When I feel the need, I want to go, I'm going to go. That's, you know, the light is calling and the light says, you need to get your ass over in Death Valley because it's going to be a good weekend. I got to go, you know, and, you know, that happens a lot. My weekends are, you know, are pretty much free when I'm not doing, you know, stuff with the kid. But again, it works out fine because again, I'm an hour and some change, less than 2 hours from Death Valley. So I can go there and be back before anybody is up and moving around. I can go, if I want to, I can go, you know, pretty far north and do a day trip, shoot sunrise, sunset, and come home and, you know, be home before everybody goes to bed, right? So I'm lucky in those regards. And again, there's a lot of stuff out here to shoot all the time. Even if I want to get out in the summertime, you know, it's hot, but I can still go to the mountains and maybe find something up there. If conditions are good, you might be able to get, you know, some good clouds or some storm action with these monsoons, but there is stuff to do. And that's one of the things that I love about being here because there's always something to do.
Is it quite seasonal then, like the way you target? Do you tend to back off during the summer just because of the heat? Or
yeah, absolutely. Like, in fact, like, so usually that's a great question. And I like to, you know, break that down. So my season for me, I can typically shoot year round, right? But I usually back off in the summertime. But for me, my go season is like late September, which is fall, right? To May, early June-ish, you know, early summer, late spring. That's usually my window. But with that being said, July, August, if the monsoon is kicking up, I'll go out and, you know, chase some of these storms that come through over here. I can go over to, you know, to the Grand Canyon or northern Arizona, southern Utah. And those storms basically will run right through that area. So if there's something really good going on, I'll go and, you know, take advantage of that as well. But, you know, generally speaking, my season is late September through, like I said, late May, early June.
I just had an off kilter thought come through my head, like when we look from afar and we see crazy things like storms and tornadoes, and we don't really have those over here. And all of a sudden I hear on the news, you know, like, oh, there's 22 tornadoes in 1 week in one place. It's like, what the hell? And it's not really something that we have a common relationship with. So the two questions there is, how would you describe the extremity of some of the weather events you get over there? And have you seen or felt an influence on a shift in that with that's potentially linked with climate change as well. Is it getting more crazy? Is it getting wilder? Is it heading in a strange direction? And because you've been shooting for 25 years, you might be a few trends there you've noticed in recent times. I'm just curious.
So I'm going to tell you. So when I first started, and I won't even add the film in there, but going digital back in, that was like 2008. We would have a lot, like every summer we can count on monsoon. Every summer. I mean, it was going down in the summertime, like, late July, around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the afternoon, those storms start to brew. 3:30, 4 o'clock, it's full on, like, you want to be in the house type stuff, because when those storms come through, they come through like tough. Lightning, flooding, I mean, the whole nine. I mean, it's bad. And depending on what side of town you're on, you get more flooding, in other areas, than, others. So you have to be on your toes with that. Like it's coming. That was summertime. Now we'll be lucky if we even see that. Another thing that is really, really, really big is the wildfires. Like we have fires, like it's like the fires now are bad. The thing is this, and a lot of people don't realize, you'll have these people that will, argue about climate change and, there's different weather patterns and blah, blah, blah. No, the climate is changing. When you have a summer that starts, or the dry season, if you will, and it starts in April and it goes through October, that means that those summers that were usually like maybe 3 months are now 5 months.
Yep.
Right? So if a fire starts in early April, that's a problem, right? Because we don't have snow melt, or it didn't rain that much during the spring. So the precipitation trends are changing, particularly out here in the Southwest, for sure. I can't speak on other areas, but in the Southwest, it's changing. It's getting drier. Our summers are lasting longer. We're having extreme heat. The lake, we have a lake that's drying out at a crazy rate. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but the lake levels over there are incredibly low, which weren't like that before. Another thing that I've noticed too is the wind. The wind here is bad. It's been like the last 3 years, the wind has picked up like a lot. I'm talking like full-on windstorms where we're getting alerts on our phone, which we've never had. I mean, I got an alert back this spring for a windstorm. I've never seen that before in my life. We're getting national, weather service, alerts on our phone telling us to get inside because we have this massive windstorm that's, has, 2 miles of visibility and, gusts up to 55, 60 miles per hour. That's not normal. So yes, whoever says that the climate is not changing, they're wrong. It is changing. Other places are having other issues, like, maybe your rainy season, for areas that, get a lot of rain, they're getting more rain, right? So then you have more flooding, flash flooding. That's, a big thing. Again, with those dry months, the soil gets completely loose, right? There's nothing to hold it together. So once a strong storm comes through and that flood starts, where does all that, debris go? So now you start having mudslides because, the hills can't, keep in, the saturation to, keep the dirt compact. Stuff is changing, and people that say that it's not, they're wrong. It is changing. And it's, it's getting worse. As a photographer, again, like I told you, I've grown and matured in those aspects of my life, because that would be something that I probably would have never even paid attention to if I didn't pick up my camera, right? But now that I have that camera and then I get out and I can see the landscape, I can see how it's changing. I can see how deforestation, people cutting down these forests, for wood and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the wrong thing, but at the same time, to what expense to the environment do we keep doing that, right? Or again, when we have these wildfires that, burn the mountain up here, and, yes, stuff will regrow. But again, if they have one big storm or a major snowstorm on that mountain, what do you get? You get avalanches, or again, you get more, mudslides and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a big thing. And especially down here in the Southwest, it's changing for sure.
Yeah. It's, if everyone was into landscape photography, then we wouldn't have these conversations, because when you do have that camera, when you do get out and you do it over a period of time, you see these changes, you see these extremes that come up that you didn't used to have these extremes to the extent that they are. And now we're seeing them happen constantly. I mean, here in Australia, obviously we have very, very similar issues with fires than what you guys do. We had a terrible season that ran obviously with the Southern Hemisphere, so we're flipped about. But the end of winter in August a couple of years ago was the start of our fire season. It ran all the way through summer, through into spring, summer, and finished in March.
Right.
It was an absolutely devastating time, and now we're in a position where New South Wales and Queensland have been absolutely hammered by floods. In fact, they're flooding right now in New South Wales again. For the third time in about 2 months. And these are serious floods. They're not just floods that go away. They're really, really quite serious. And so we're seeing the same thing. But you are right about when you've got that camera in your hand and you're getting out there, you notice things that other people don't seem to notice. And it's a bit of a pity that not everyone's into it like we are. But, but I think we should probably maybe get into some.
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to be remiss to our viewers if we don't get some serious airtime for your incredible imagery, David. So
start talking about positive things.
Like, hey man, this is a podcast.
I think no, you know what though? I think it's great because again, it goes back to what I was telling you earlier. It's like this is stuff that we don't talk about, right?
Yeah.
This is stuff that is really important, and for what we do. I mean, look, the photography community is small, right? And we're just ordinary people out here taking pictures, right? But at the same time, that imagery is very powerful, right? So if somebody sees that and maybe gets a little backstory behind some of the imagery and stuff that we've seen that we can share, I think that we should definitely talk about it a little bit, and I think that any kind of awareness is good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you in some ways you're preaching the converted here, David. Like the three of us have a very strong relationship with the understanding of the power of photography and conservation in particular, and Tasmania has one of the greatest lineages and living lineages in the world of that very thing. And that's shaped Luke and Nick and I individually and very deeply personally in terms of our relationship with imagery. And just going back to that conversation you had, I think that word relationship comes up. You spend time with a landscape, you build a relationship with it. You can hear its voice, you can understand its nuances, you can feel the shifts and changes in it. And because you've dedicated time into building some kind of relationship with it. And I think, you're alluding to that from a huge amount of time and a broad area down there. And we have our own kind of senses and nuances here in Australia. And it's wild, man. Like it's so much more apparent, I think, to us because it's so kind of in your face and directly translates into our lives on a daily basis that may not happen for people that, live in an air-conditioned office and drive home to an air-conditioned house and drive between the two in their air-conditioned car. It's kind of like there's not a lot of living dynamic interactivity with the natural world, and that's I'm really present to that as a person, as a human, as a society, as a culture, and it's been a huge part of my life. And it always will be. And I feel like there's an invitation, if not a responsibility, if you have skills, abilities, and gifts in this area to bring awareness. And as I get a bit older and a little bit more clear on just how strong and relevant and what's going on and the changes in the world, I'm less shy about how to use that voice visually and a lot more direct. And in some ways, I don't even mind really challenging people as well. That's probably a personal shift that's happening in me. And I'm curious to see, with that passion coming up in you and that conversation, how that may come through more in your work over time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like part of me I would like to do it, but the other part of me is like, I don't know, like, I just don't know, like, if it's really like worth it, because it's like, everything is so politicized now. It's just like, there's this line that's just drawn in the sand. And if you step on either side of that, it's like, it's just on your head. And I don't know if I have the energy for all that, Paul, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that if I was asked about it, I would definitely talk about it, but I don't know if I'm going to actively, go out and, pursue stuff like that. But I don't have an issue with talking about it because it's out there, it's real, it's something that's going on. But like I said, I just don't know if I have the energy for that, because like I said, everything is so politicized now, and everything is about money, right? So if it's not going to benefit somebody in some kind of way where they can make money, or some kind of power move or something like that, it's kind of like, do I go there? Is it worth it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show in itself. Following the money trail following the money trail is a huge aspect to the conversation around climate change and the influences that we have on it as a culture. But so we won't go down that any further, David, because I want to see your work. But I'm also like, when you talked a lot in the show about all the different things that influence and shaped who you are and how you see and what you do, it's with you. So it'll be coming through your work in subtle and elegant and maybe even unconscious or unspoken ways as well. Just I don't think you need to be running around with a political hammer and a flag to be creating work that has positive influence on relationship with country. And one of the greatest and oldest tools used by all artists for a long period of time is just beauty alone to build relationship and rapport and inspire that sense of delicacy or even vulnerability that comes through some places that almost unconsciously brings people to a point where they want to protect it or look after it or just be a little more careful with how they tread. And I think there's a sliding scale, and I don't necessarily feel like a large political hammer is a useful one either. And I deliberately am around organizations that do that, and I shy away from that myself. So I'm not saying I'm running around with a hammer, but at the same time, I am getting less shy about, well, how can I use and be a little bit more deliberate with that conversation? Because that's just where I'm at. But I want to see some pictures, brother. Like, I think that's one of the best starting conversations we've ever had on a show. And I feel like in some ways we don't even need to show any pictures, but I know a lot of people in the world would be pretty upset if we don't get to celebrate some of yours, brother. So
we got super deep and didn't show any pictures. I mean, like, what's going on?
Like I said, that was one of the best starts for a show I think we've ever had. That was so fantastic, and it still is. I'm looking forward to mirroring that through some imagery at the same time and seeing where it goes in the show.
Too funny. Yeah, so whenever you guys are ready, let me know. We'll get this started.
We're ready, man. You share the screen and you can start off wherever you like.
All right, let's share screen. Let's go to this. All right, guys. So what we got here, this is a new body of work that I'm working on. Well, I shouldn't say working on, that I just finished. This is a retrospective of imagery that I've made over the years in Death Valley. I think it's really good, talking point in the fact that we were talking about the different seasons of the time frame that I make my imagery in, and when you're looking at my time in Death Valley, I'm there all the time, multiple times a year. I can't even, I've basically lost track of how many times I've been there, but I make a lot of images from this area. Some more so have meaning to it. Some of them don't. Some of them I just really like the way it looks. I like the feel. I'm one of those kind of people. I always like to feel light in my images. If there's like light coming into the scene, I like to feel that light. I like to feel the mood of these images. And basically, these images are over what, now we're in 2022. I think the earliest image that I have in here is maybe like 2015. And again, not saying that 2015 was necessarily a productive year for me, visiting here, but maybe it's an image that I've always wanted to just save for a later gallery like I have here and just really show it as a complete body of work. This is the product of that. What is really cool about this for me, and we talked about the evolution as a person, right? And as you're constantly evolving, the thing here is that I learned that I can actually hold on to images for a long time, which I always do anyway, but 5+ years to hold on to an image is a long time. And I'm happy and proud to say that, yes, I can do that. And it was nice. I didn't feel like I needed to rush any of this stuff out, right? So typically what I do is, I'll go through my curation process, and, some images aren't necessarily like bad images, but also like my galleries that have like a flow. And we'll talk about that flow as well when we dive into this a little bit more. But I like the images that have like an overall flow. So, visually it's just smooth and easy on the eyes. And with this gallery, it's going to be a lot bigger than what I normally do. But again, it's, like over 5 years worth of images, right? But the other thing that I really learned from this is that I felt like this was the setup or the start for maybe another part of my journey with my photography, is maybe coming up with a book. And how this is laid out, it feels like a book. Like it just has like a feeling of, I can open a book and look at these images in a book. So, putting this together was really special for me. Like all my galleries are, but once I got done with this one felt really, really, really good.
Yeah, I do want to flow through it, David, so you can get a sense of that flow.
Yes. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna move my. Since I'm on my laptop, I'm gonna move, guys. So you're gonna see a little bit of movement here. This light at this time of year in the summertime, the light gets a little harsh. So I'm gonna be moving. All right, there we go. I'm gonna be a little bit darker, but bear with me. It's just because of the light that's coming into my house at the time. So you guys still good there?
Yep.
Yeah, brother.
All right, great. So what we'll do, let's go into the actual flow of this real quick. Hold on real quick. Let's view on site. So how my website is set up, I have columns of 3, like rows of 3 images. So if you look at the images, you can see that there's going to be kind of like a subtle pattern here. So on the first row, you got images that have all sky, right? Your big, grand, wide scene. The next row here, you'll see I got Joshua trees, right? Then I'll mix it up again. And then another one, you'll have a little bit more wide open scenes. The next section, we got all Badlands, right? Then when we go to our next page, same thing, got Badlands. Then next row, and the only reason why I'm showing you the thumbnails now is so you can kind of get an idea of when I look at the thumbnails and how it's presented on the actual website. If we were on like a 27-inch, it'd be a little bit wider. That's usually how I process my images. I have a 27-inch iMac, so stuff would be a little bit wider, and I do that in my office. But for this, I didn't really feel the need to go into my office to jump on and do this kind of stuff. So I'm doing everything from my laptop. So the orientation might be a little bit different, but you're still going to get the idea of the flow of the gallery. So on this next row, again, more wide open scenes with these sand dunes. And then the next 2 rows, again, sand dunes, but again, wider scenes. Next row is going to be more intimate and abstract. Our next row here is blowing sand dunes, right? Next row here is more the pastel, more softer monochromatic look to the images. The next two sets of sand dune images are all abstract, complete abstract. But then you look at this one, it's more dealing with shapes and overlaps. Then we go to our next batch of images here, which is going to deal with texture, the more intimate landscape, right? Then we deal with mud cracks, more abstract, just more intimate stuff. Now we're doing more textures again, shape. Now we're dealing with salt. So again, these are all salt images in this row here, all salt. Next row, some more sand dunes, but again, textures, more movement. You have a lot more movement within those images. And the same ones with this last row. You got more textured movement, more subtleties within the scene. So now what we'll do, let's go back to the very beginning, and then we can kind of discuss the images itself and look at them really big. Everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Nice. So this image here, I took last year. This was actually a kind of funny scene. I was, we were going to the Eastern Sierras, my wife and I started off at the dunes, and I didn't get anything really that good. And I told her, I was like, look, I go, it looks like over to the west, it looks like the light is going to be really nice over there. So I said, I think we should go over there, just kind of, since we're already going in that direction, let's go over there and see what happens. And sure enough, we were going through the little passes, and we got to the other side of the pass, and literally the sky just starts burning, what you see here. Now, the cool thing about this image is you got full lenticular clouds going across the whole sky, which you don't really get that too often. And to be able to capture those lenticular clouds shooting across the sky like that is just, it's just a rare scene. And just being able to, see that and capture that was just really, really, really cool. And like I said, that light burned. Even when we left, the light was actually still going off for probably another 15 to 20 minutes after sunset.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, this next image. Again, this is a location in Death Valley with these mud cracks that I've shot, numerous times. And I've gotten great light over here, quite a few times. And quite frankly, I probably wouldn't have even shot this, but the light on those center mountains there with that moon, with that full moon was really, really, really nice. And just and I'm a real big fan of soft light within the scene. Soft light on the landscape is like my favorite. And just how that soft light on those mud cracks, it just kind of has like that nice soft glow with a little touch, little hint of sunlight, illuminate everything was just really, really, really nice. Like I said, typically I probably wouldn't even have shot this, but I think the light was kind of special here.
Yeah, beautiful.
I still remember trying to follow those directions you gave me to some of those areas. It's like, stop at this and 100 meters, but that way, and 1.2 miles down. Oh my God. And I was racing around trying to find, because the mud tracks are a big feature in Death Valley, and time of year probably affects them to some extent. And the locations are very, you've either got to go on a trodden path and walk for frickin' ages to get anywhere that hasn't been stamped around by people, or at the same time, there's little nuances and subtle areas that sort of pop up and change, and the locals kind of know about. So it's an obvious kind of feature, but at the same time, your local knowledge has a really big influence on where to be at the right time.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Paul, one of the things here, like this particular section of this area, playa of mud, there was only a handful of us early on that shot this playa. And I almost want to go back and just kind of show you, I know this might be a little bit annoying for some of your viewers, but I do apologize.
Your show, brother, do whatever you like.
But I want to show you just the difference in that playa from when we first went there with the floods. That same playa is, where are you at? Is this right here? So the cracks are a lot more defined here. This is prior to people actually trampling, workshops going out to this location. The cracks here were in very pristine condition. I mean, really, really, really nice. In fact, if you can kind of look at the edges of the playa, you can see that all the edges of these mud cracks are super sharp. They're nice. They're nicely crisp. You don't see any breakage. They're not rounded off. If you go back to the new work and that same playa, you can see how the edges are all worn and they're all rounded off. And you can see like on the edges, on the corners, some of these have little chips and nicks and breaks from where people have stepped at, or, you know, set their tripod or their bag or whatever. But yeah, that's one of those things there that has happened over time. This is a perfect example of that. I should have looked. I think that first image, well, in fact, I can tell you, that image I took was in 2016. This one was last year. So you're looking at 5-year difference, and you can see what 5 years does, you know, to the landscape.
So I'm completely unfamiliar with these sorts of areas. So those cracks remain like that for years and years and years, and obviously they've been eroded by humans, as you're explaining. Clearly, how often do you get rain somewhere like this that then softens the mud enough to change it?
Right. That's a great question. Well, you know, the erosion also is, you know, somewhat human, but also the wind.
The wind.
What's really cool about this location, there's plenty of times I've gone out here where it's really windy and you can hear the chips of the mud. You can hear the chips of the playa like skimming across it. So it almost has like this chime, like this little chip chime that's going across. You can hear it. But just a kind of a backstory to answer your question about with the rain and stuff, and, you know, enough moisture to get these, you know, cracks to reshape. So back in 2015, there was a major flood. We had like record-breaking rain for like months straight. And if you see those distant mountains, there's these sections back there called alluvial fans. And in these alluvial fans, you get like a lot of debris that, you know, is eroded from the mountain. And, you know, once it hits like the bottom part of the mountains, you know, just starts picking up the dirt and the mud sediments and that kind of thing. This is a product of that. All of this was all mud that came from those mountains that you see in the background. Okay. That literally just made this huge playa. So that should just give you an idea of how much rain there was. It was multiple floods. In fact, the section of the road that's up there about a mile and some change, that section of road was, you know, covered with mud, and they had to remove all the mud. But this is a product of that. Now, to get something like this, I mean, it could be another 10, could be 15 years, could be 20, who knows? You know, we just don't know. So, you know, this is a really, you know, special feature here that, you know, we don't see very often. So I think it's, you know, one of those things that is really cool to, you know, to have, because again, you know, being there, you know, 5 years ago, seeing how it was to where it is now. Yeah.
Well, I think David, there's another larger conversation again about the forces that shape that. Like, for people that don't know a lot about Death Valley, it's one of those extreme environments on planet Earth. It has some of the hottest recorded temperatures on the planet. It's one of the lowest places on the planet. And it has these really extreme kind of weather events in terms of wind and flood occasionally as well. But the part of the process that's created that cracking and that baking is they've literally been baked by, like, you know, 55 degree plus temperatures for huge amount of periods of time of the amount of heat and wind that flows through this valley is insane. And so that extremity is part of what breaks them up and creates the shape. And I know a little bit less around the flooding events and how that's kind of shaped, but I know the wind has a huge influence through the mountains of kind of bringing debris down, actually. And I wouldn't have thought it'd be wind as much as rain, but wind actually has far more of an influence than I would have thought on this landscape.
Yeah, I think if you guys get a chance, just you can Google it. You can just Google Death Valley floods 2015, and you'll see the amount of damage that it caused. It basically tore that park apart in many areas. It was really, really, really crazy. In fact, one of the events I was actually coming back. In fact, I had to end my trip. I had to cut it short because of all the rain they had got. And I was driving out, Paul, you probably somewhat familiar with that area over in the Eastern Sierras, Trona Pinnacles, close to Ridgecrest. And I was driving out there early in the morning, and the rain was so heavy. Like, I mean, you can see the road actually starting to flood and all the debris. It was crazy. Went out there to Trono, me and my buddy shot, we got stuck in the mud, go figure. And then we saw that there was another storm coming later on that night. So we ended up shooting Trona for sunrise and sunset. And I hightailed it back to Vegas. That same night, that's when they had another flood. It flooded that night. The next morning it flooded, and that's when they had another one of the huge mud flows that went across the road and washed out the road out there.
Yeah, that place is spooky, man. Like, I heard that they shot some of the early Star Wars films there. Like, at the pinnacles there. It's kind of random where it sits in the middle of the valleys there, and it's pretty unique.
Yeah, just on the other side of these mountains here is where they shot those movies back over here. Speaking of events, this image here, high velocity. This was another one of those weird, crazy, storm events where you can just see there's just a huge dust storm there. The previous image, the other image that I actually had from this shoot, I didn't process, just like a huge, like, dust wall and shooting up almost as high as the mountains. And, if you look there, it's almost like a mini tornado going on back there. But what was really cool is that the light was just kind of cutting through onto the left-hand side. And, just those cotton ball patterns, in the landscape, in the foreground, just is really interesting foreground element there. And, you just have this huge sky. I had to take, actually 2 images, one for the foreground and one for the sky, because the sky was just so big and huge and all the stuff going on up top. I want to make sure I capture that just to, give the enormity of what was going on. But yeah, this was another one of those super, in fact, I think this was probably the windiest I've ever seen it and been in Death Valley. The wind was blowing so hard, like I could barely hear. I couldn't hear anything because the wind was just blowing in my ears that hard. And again, you can hear the little fragments of salt going, just being blown across the playa. Like, it almost sounds like glass hitting glass.
How do you just on another subject, how do you protect your gear in an environment like that? You've got dust and mud blowing everywhere and salt and corrosion.
You don't. You just go. I'll be the first to tell you that I am not very I'm not very nice to my gear. I just go out there and I just go. I've been lucky enough to have camera bodies that can withstand a lot of this. But yeah, I don't. I just go and just do the best that I can. I will say on this day I had two tripod blowovers. Thank God my camera wasn't on there, but yes, 2 tripod blowovers on this day. So, yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, that takes a bit of doing.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. This is another section of Death Valley that's on the west side of the park. You get a little bit higher in elevation, but what's cool about this area is you have all these Joshua trees, and I absolutely love Joshua trees. These are really cool because they're nice and clean. Like the bark on them is clean, and they're all like one solid color. A lot of times with these Joshua trees, they'll be missing like big chunks and big patches, and sometimes it's like have like these different colors of like brownish yellow, because they just don't get a lot of moisture, so they just kind of get nice and they get like really dry. But what's cool here is that you have like this Joshua forest, if you will, but there's nice space and separation within the scene where you can create that nice separation of background, midground, and the foreground, along with the Joshua's having really cool character and like this unique way that they're all kind of the arms are extending out in different kind of ways, and again you just got a really cool sunset, and I just really like the scene. I just like the depth in it, and those Joshuas just have a lot of character.
Again, I don't know a lot about Joshua trees. Are they really slow growing? I assume they are.
Yeah, they're very slow growing. They don't get a ton of water, but they're cactus, so cacti like this can thrive in this desert. Now, what's really cool too is if you look at the bushes on top, they have they're green, they're nice and fresh. Which you only really get that in the springtime. Summertime, those things go like yellow and brown and stuff like that. So in the spring, if you get lucky, you'll get a little bit of green on those on the tops, on the bushel part. And they actually grow flowers too. They actually bud in the springtime as well. They get like these white, almost like these white, I don't know how to explain it. It's a white flower, but it doesn't completely bloom out. But yeah, it looks pretty cool too. Yeah. And again, same thing here. Just like the character of it, it just has like this really nice character. Again, with that little bit of green. And again, I love that soft pastel light here. Just really nice flow throughout the scene. Simple, but I feel like it just has like a really nice flow, and the distant mountains just give it a little bit of separation as well. This one, again, this was another one of those shots that was kind of by accident. I was coming back from the Eastern Sierras, doing some droning over the lake, which, Paul is familiar with that lake as much as I am. This particular guy here, again, just the character of him. But I remember on this evening, I had got done shooting with the drone, and I was coming back to Vegas, and I look in my rear view mirror, and the sky, I wasn't sure if the sky was going to really catch really, really, really good light, but it looks like there was a ton of potential there. And I just started seeing this very, very hint of color on the horizon. It's like, let me pull over and let me go hike out a little bit to see if I can find, a tree that has some good character, lone Joshua, and kind of go from there. I came across this guy, which was really cool too, because of the bushes. I think it was like late fall, and who knew that the desert gets a little bit of fall color like this. So you see all like the little red and orange bushes out there, and the little brush. And sure enough, that sky blew up like crazy. And the funny thing about this image is I had to take a lot of the color out because it was so strong.
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah, it was crazy. And, there was so much reflected light onto the landscape. Like if I would have kept it like straight out of the camera, you would have saw a lot more color within the scene. So I had to tone that down quite a bit. Just to kind of get a little bit of separation, from the sky in the foreground. So yeah, that's the product of this right here. It's a really cool scene. Now this one, we talk about rare events. I call this hidden design. This was 2017. This is another year where Death Valley actually got a ton of water, a ton of rain in the Badwater Basin. this area doesn't typically fill up with water at all. Typically it's completely dry, and you get the white salt, cracks and stuff throughout this playa here. But there was enough rain, in the wintertime, that winter, where that playa will fill up with water. Now that water it's not very deep. It's maybe like 2 or 3 inches. But what's cool about this, as the weeks go by, you'll see like it'll completely dry out at some point. But what's nice here is there's just enough water that's, dried out, because I actually went to this location the week prior and there was still a lot of water in it, but not enough to where it exposed like the cracks underneath the surface of the water. And here you just got enough water that exposes the cracks and still gives it that nice reflection and sheen that you can still tell that there's water there. With the sky here, there was no clouds, but usually I don't even bother with scenes like this, but I felt like this is one of those rare events that needed to be captured. And with these designs of these salt formations was really, really interesting. And again, it's just one of those rare scenes that, like I said, typically I probably wouldn't have even gone out there if there wasn't a sky. But for that, I had to make sure I had that, because this is something very unique and different.
It probably would have been too busy with an amazing sort of cloud lit up sky. I reckon it's just perfect the way it is.
I think you're right. Sometimes, that's the thing, it's tricky because we get so caught up with, we want these, textured skies or these colorful skies. And sometimes we don't really think about what's going on with the overall landscape.
Yep.
And I think you're right. Like maybe in the case here that maybe, a too colorful sky might've been, a little too much for this scene, because again, you got to ask yourself, what exactly do you want to convey in the scene? Do you want to display this rare event, right, with these cool salt patterns underneath, or do we want that with this big sky, to maybe quote unquote complement it? So, sometimes, I guess the big sky doesn't necessarily always have to be the case.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for working with what you've got.
Sure.
A lot of photographers and I was exactly the same. You go out with the expectation of something that you had in your mind, and it didn't work, and so you just gave up and didn't do any photography at all, or what you shot just was what you had in your mind, but the conditions weren't there for it, and so it didn't turn out right. I'm a big advocate for changing your ideas and changing your plans based on what the conditions actually are, what you've got in front of you, and working with that, and not getting that mindset, I'm here to shoot this particular thing.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's, it's a really good, a good practice, I think, to have, with that, and not getting overly caught up with that, because I think that was one of my biggest issues that I had early on. And to be quite honest with you, it actually stunted my growth in terms of, vision. And once I got out of that mindset, again, my work went, a totally different direction.
David, I got two questions that are coming up with the way you're presenting the work. Is it seems like cropping has a role in your final presentation, and obviously the naming as well. And they're two quite different processes, but they're not processes that everyone engages in. Like I think early on I used to crop an image to suit the shape of what it was, but then from almost like a professional perspective, it was awkward to try and frame and mount pieces that weren't of a consistent kind of proportion. So I actually probably reshape my shooting a little bit to suit a consistent, and I'm kind of just used to that in my mind now, but I've noticed there's subtle differences in the way you've cropped a lot of these. And also, you know, the naming is, I don't think everyone has a gift for that. And I think it can be a real challenge to commit to a consistent naming structure, because some of them might come to you very easily, and some of them it might take ages or years to even have a name come forward for you. So they're two processes as we go through the images, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about.
Yeah. So, you know, we'll start with the cropping first. So I try to keep general crop, two, 3, 1 1s, 5 4s. Lately, I've been doing a lot of 5 7. I've been liking that quite a bit. Like with an image like this, again, I had to do 2 images for, just my sky and for my foreground, because it had such a big sky. And what was going on here, if you notice, and again, it goes into the title, mimicking lines, that was just kind of came to my head when I was, looking at it. You can see the lines in the sky are mimicking the landscape, right? The lines leading to the mountain. So that's just, it just kind of came to me. But the sky, again, was such a big sky that, I ended up shooting 2 frames for the foreground and the sky. But what I'll end up doing is, when I have scenes that are like this, I typically just go to the 5:4 format just automatically. Because I personally, I shoot Nikon. So all of my stuff that you see that's in a 5:4 or 1:1, I do that in the field. I have to actually physically see the composition in my camera. I honestly don't crop very much, because I can't crop to what I don't see. So for me, if I don't see it in the field, how it's presented in my work, that's just, it just doesn't work for me. I've made it is a little bit more challenging, but what I found is that when you set your format in camera, you have to have that composition dialed into that format. If it's not dialed into that format, you're going to have a harder time, trying to make it work, for me at least. So a lot of the stuff that you see, like if it's like besides the 5 7, but if you see 5 4s, vertical 4 5s, or 1 1s, those are all done in camera. So
yeah, that's interesting. And we'll just point out for those that don't shoot Nikon or Nikon, I shoot it as well. For some reason, when you select the ratio, that's what you get. And I think with Sony and Canon, if you select a 1:1 or a 5:4, it doesn't. You've still got the 2:3 format to go back to revert to if you can. But with us, we don't.
You're committing to it.
You're committed to it. You've lost it, and it's interesting you talk about it that way, David, because I almost never shoot in the crop version. I shoot the full 2:3 because I don't want to lose that stuff. But I do a lot of 5:4s myself, and I do try and visualize the 5:4, but I'll shoot it 2:3 and then crop it in Photoshop. So it's interesting that you work that way and I work a different way. But it's, for me, it's I've got this sort of anxiety about losing the edges. Maybe I did get the composition wrong in my mind, so I can actually, I've got a bit of wriggle room, but I think it's a more disciplined approach you've got, that you really do
it's
that
ballsy. I like it.
Really nailed. Yeah.
Well, see, the thing is like for me, like when I'm in the field, I don't spray and pray. Like, you get a lot of guys that just, they'll hold that shutter and it goes. Me personally, I honestly don't take a lot of images, like in terms of like multiple stuff, right? I'll take maybe like this image here. I think I shot this image maybe 4 different ways, right? Maybe with that lead in line, maybe a little bit more to the left or right, but that's it. I'll shoot this and then I'll move on to the next. When the light is changing like this, I like to move around. And I may switch out to the long lens. This is just one of the few times that you actually will see a wide angle scene with my dunes, because a lot of times just the light for me just isn't working with the composition. And again, I'm very big on my composition first and foremost before the light. So, you know, and again, I do let the light dictate how I shoot, but, you know, when it comes to actually being in the field, I don't really take a whole lot of images. You know, I'll stick to something, I'll try to fine tune it, and then I'll move on to the next. You get people that will, you know, sit on a composition for a little bit. I'm not like that. If I have to, like if I don't have like multiple compositions in the area that I'm shooting, then maybe I will. Or if it's something very, very specific that I'm trying to get, then I might sit. But a lot of times I'm kind of moving around. And again, when it comes to the crop, you know, I'm just like, you know what, I got enough megapixels to make that work. I mean, you can see this print behind me. This is a 60-inch print that I did in a, you know, in a 4.5, and it got plenty of detail there. So I don't get overly caught up with the megapixels. You know, I just get rid of them. I don't need them.
David, when you talked about doing a second frame for the sky, what exactly do you mean from a focal length or technical point of view?
So all I'm doing is, like, say for example, with this particular scene, I think I might have shot this maybe at, I don't know, maybe 14 millimeter. So, you know, you'll have pretty much the dune up to maybe the middle part of the mountain and a little bit of the sky. All the extra stuff up top, I'll just pan the camera up maybe 5 degrees, maybe 10, just to get more of that sky. All I'll do is I'll just set the, I'll just make the canvas a little bit bigger, and then I'll just blend that top part of the sky into each other. And then from there, then I can just, you know, crop, you know, or not crop, but put it into the 5.4 format or whatever format I choose to do. I might have to squish it a little bit or warp it a little bit just to kind of make it fit. But yeah, that's what I do there. This is a really interesting scene here. You know, I've never seen these rainbow type, you know, rays in the middle of the sky like this. The cool thing about this scene, if you look down in the middle of the scene, you'll see the playa down below. That's Badwater. That's Badwater Basin down there, and all the white stuff is the salt, which is, you know, it's really cool. This particular shot was taken up at I think it was at Dante's View or Dante's Peak. I don't remember the name of the viewpoint up there, but it's taken up top, so you're really high up. I think you're, I don't know, I can't remember what the elevation is, but it's a lot higher than what you are down in the valley. And again, this is one of those transitions and storms, you know, coming over the mountains, and this rainbow, or I don't even know what it's called. I tried to look it up and tried to find stuff online, but I can't find any information on what that exactly is called. But it just looks like, you know, like something is just being transported in the middle of this scene, you know, something science fiction. So, you know, it's just one of those rare occurrences that, you know, that just happened there.
Yeah. Any of you guys seen anything like this? I don't think I have.
Yeah, I have. I've shot it once before. I was actually, Luke, when we were up on the Three Capes track, and we had those showers coming over, we were getting that rainbow that was right close to the water that was like this.
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's almost like it's just a rainbow, but it's just in some Virga, the very isolated rain shower.
Yeah,
it's coming down. Yeah,
it was weird. It was just, but it was such a cool scene. I just kind of like the flow of it, just where it's at, the placement of it, you know, with the dappled light. Really cool looking scene. But yeah, that one's definitely a different and special one.
Beautiful.
So here, so you can see we kind of went with all the cloud stuff that had, you know, clouds, these wider scenes. So now what we're going into is the Badlands section, a little bit wider scenes of the Badlands. And these by far are some of my favorite scenes to shoot, whether it be in Death Valley or just across the Southwest in general. I tell
David,
people,
just before you go any further, can you explain what Badlands is? It's not a word or a term we have in Australia, even though it's largely desert. What does it sort of allude to?
so these badlands are eroded areas, obviously over time through water. Typically, these were areas that were probably once mountains, but the amount of rain, usually these are areas that are towards the base of the mountains. And over a period of time with rain, and obviously we talk about wind, you get this erosion. And all the sediment in these quote unquote rocks, it's soft. It's very soft, but it's very fragile. So any kind of water that touches this, it just erodes away. What's cool is there's underneath all this sediment, you get all these different colors. When you shoot these badlands, for me, I always like to shoot these in low soft light. So this is either before sunrise or after sunset. This is when the colors really, really come out, and then you really start getting the shape and formations. It really starts to show in all the colors. So what you can see here is like you have very, very, very subtle shadows, right? But you can see all the soft light on all the right side of the edges, lights coming from the right side. But with this particular scene, it's so cool because you just have all these convergent lines going up right through the center, and you have like that little point there. And then, if you look a little bit closer into the middle of the frame, you'll see that little, I don't know if you want to call it, it's like a hoodoo is forming right here. Like, so at some point, that's going to actually show a little bit more, over time with more erosion and, more, rain and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a really, really, really cool scene. And like I said, the Badlands typically are found in desert areas here in the Southwest. There are other areas in the northern part of the US, like Badlands National Park, where those Badlands are like 4 times the size of these. They're like mountains. They're so big and so huge, which is and it's an odd place because it's flat, it's in the prairies. But, for whatever reason, I guess at one point there was mountains there, and, over, probably thousands and thousands and thousands of years of, rain and weather and erosion, they form. But this is what you're seeing here is these Badlands.
What sort of scale are we talking about with this picture? I mean, it could be any scale looking at it, but you obviously know what it is. I'm not quite sure how big these Badlands or in this photograph really are.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So another thing that, if you notice about some of my like long range or long focal length images, and even with some of my intimate abstract stuff, one of the things that I love about scenes like this is there's no sense of scale. Yeah. So it keeps the viewer kind of like yourself wondering, well, how big is that? Is it little? Is it tall? Those hills there they're pretty big. Like I would say probably like if you would go to the center part, that section would probably be a good, I don't know, 200 to 300 feet tall.
Wow. Okay.
These lower hills down in the bottom are probably like maybe, I don't know, 50 feet up, maybe a little bit higher. But yeah, those hills they're big. They're big.
I think, Dave, one of the things that speaks to me, because I was shooting some of these things when I was over there as well, and because I had a limited amount of time and I couldn't necessarily be at one place at the perfect lighting time, I either sacrificed getting around to wait to just be in the one place for the one shot, or I moved around and got what I got. And because I was still in an exploratory kind of phase, I moved around a lot. So I was just looking at some of my shots like this in harsher light, just going, oh, it just doesn't work. Yeah. But, because I don't live down the road and I can't just come back for those targeted kind of moments. I think that's one of the things that you have, being your backyard is the specific lighting conditions for a certain scene you want, and you can just drive just to get that shot. So a little jealous, but at the same time, I love flying over Badwater Basin. It's one of the coolest things I've ever done, man. That place is epic from the air, and I haven't released most of my work from there yet. And
I love your work from there. It's kind of funny. I was just a real quick story. So when I first started flying my drone, there was only a handful of guys that that were shooting, aerial abstracts with the drone, right? So this is probably like, I think early 2016 and maybe late 2015, but early 2016. So anyway, I'm doing this research and I'm just looking up aerial photography in general, right? And aerial photography at that time was very broad. There wasn't a whole lot of people doing it. So I come across this article and I see Paul's work in there. I was like, who's this guy with all this crazy abstract stuff? I go on your website and I see I was like, what the hell? So early on, when I started learning how to fly the drone, before I even, was up in a plane or anything like that, Paul's work was a huge inspiration to me for the early abstract stuff that I was doing. So thank you for that, Paul. I think the article might have been like a f-stopper on.
I remember the one. Yeah, it's with a French guy, Emmanuel, someone or other, and my good brother, Scotty McCook.
Yeah, McCook was in there too. Yeah.
So I've been sitting on most of my Death Valley work. I've done quite a number of shoots out there with my good mate Captain Shell. I think Caroline might have had a crack with him. He's like 82 now.
We were gonna fly with him. We were gonna fly with Shell. He was great. He was all business, but we had bad conditions, so we couldn't get up with him. But
it's a difficult place to fly, man.
That's what he was saying. He was just saying,
like, so not only that, the wind conditions and the thermals are insane. Is most of the area is military exclusion zones for flying.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what he was saying.
But so hardly anyone actually flies out there, and most of the planes that are out there are Pipers, which are low wing, which are just useless for doing aerial photography out of. So it took me 3 months to line up even someone that had the right skill set, capacity, plane, and even the licensing of the pilot. Like Shell's one of those rare pilots that can fly in the dark as well. Okay. So when I was trying to get Badwater Basin, we would literally leave like 45 minutes way before sunrise in order to be able to get to Badwater Basin just as the light was hitting the floor. And there's not really a lot of air bases you can fly from nearby. But I was just going to say, one thing I'm conscious of is by the time we get to the show, I only saw 10 of David's shots. So let's talk and move through at the same time, because you and I can tell stories of the
couch. So it's pretty crazy because like I said, you're one of the few people that I've seen, with any of the shots from over there. So I think that, the imagery that you have from over there, you should be really proud of, because it's something really, really, really rare and, unique. And again, I found a lot of inspiration from that work early on. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't released most of that work actually yet. I've been sitting on it.
You need to get
David Thompson, man. I've been sitting on it.
So get on it. So again, I'm gonna just kind of go through these a little bit quicker, just for time purposes. But again, same area, the Badlands. You can see how it varies. You can see here, this section is completely different than this, right? But again, we have all these nice overlapping and conversion lines. And, again, with my Badlands, I always kind of like to have like a center point of interest. This is another one, Paul, where we were talking about our aspect ratio or the crop. This is one that I shot in camera at 5.4. This is what I have to see in my camera. And, this is, the final product of that, no cropping or anything, just straight aspect ratio in the camera. Go on to the next, same thing. You can tell real soft light, I call this one Silent Hills, because the light that we have is nice and soft. It's quiet. It's that quiet light that that I want on these hills. And again, you got like this alluvial fan as your lead-in lines up to all these cool formations. Again, I can't stress enough to people, if you want to shoot these Badlands, soft light is the way to go. What we have here is now we just flip the aspect ratio is still 5.4, but we're just doing it in vertical. Again, soft light on the Badlands with just all these multiple layers, throughout the scene.
What sort of focal length is that, David?
This one I shot with my 200 to 500. So I think this was probably around 300 millimeter. super tight. Again, we talk about, the scale here. It's hard to get an idea of what the scale is here, but those heels are pretty tall. If you were to trip and fall off of that, you'd be tumbling for a little bit. Yeah,
I remember. I think it was Jared. We had Jared Armijo on the show, like
oh yeah.
A long time ago, and he just said he just shoots everything at like 200 mil in Death Valley. Like,
yeah,
it's kind of his go-to is long compressed imagery, and it's not something you traditionally think of, I think, when you're approaching a new landscape.
Yeah.
But it's a magnificent way to approach and kind of pull out the nuances of all the different features in the valley there.
Yeah, it's something different, and again, dare to be different with the artistry and, with the imagery, because it shows, because you'll come up with, chances are you're going to come up with something different because people aren't going to shoot it that, that tight. Same thing on this one. This is another one, and, in those Badlands that, went in really tight just to, focus on that nice soft light and, the textures and, the layers here. So again,
it's super open. Did you really pull out the sort of mid-range contrast in there on this one, David? Like,
this one
incredibly open.
Yeah, it's a little bit more softer. And that's another thing too, is like I like to kind of switch it up, like so if you look at like this image here and this one, and even in the next one, you can tell that it's a little bit more airy, right? A little bit more softer on the softer side versus stuff like this, right? So again, remember we were talking earlier about that feel. Like sometimes I want the feeling of, a little bit more softer, a little bit more gentler. And that's what we got with these three images here. And it goes back to what I was telling you earlier about just the arrangement and the flow of the gallery. We go a little bit softer, go a little bit more gentler. And if you notice too, the ratios here, I did shoot this in 2:3, which, I'm a little bit bent out of shape about, but this is from, a couple years ago. And I think at the time, I was just moving a little bit quicker and wasn't thinking about putting my camera into the other format. But I also try to keep, the format similar as the viewing experience goes through. So, you can see here, you got all verticals. You go here, we got 5.4s. So, I try to keep that consistency through the gallery, with all the images. Same thing here. This one is this is a square crop. So if you look here, we got, a square crop in this one, or, shoot in the field, square. Same thing, overlapping layers, nice and soft, settled light. Again, we got another one. Just something a little bit different.
So plainly, David.
I imagine it's very difficult to get this, but it'd be pretty cool to see this just after a really heavy downpour of rain and have, those sort of ribbons of water coming down the side. Have you ever seen that before, or is it just?
So what happens is, so after the rains, picture these hills as a huge sponge, right? So if you got a dry sponge, it's usually, kind of pale looking, right? So once you add water to it, it automatically gets saturated and dark. That's what happens to these hills. It does the same thing. It just gets really dark and saturated. You can tell that very muted and, softer tones, earth tones. I like to try to go more earthy tones with these Badlands, with these particular Badlands images. I like to go more earthy with how, they're presented. So, we were talking about maybe a lot more of the wide open dune images. You're going to see the next three images will be a little bit more open dune scenes with no sky. The other ones we saw sky, but this one, again, morning soft light. The dunes aren't really taking on like that hard contrast with the the light and shadows. It's more soft and pastel, and just I love how this image just flows front to back, and just with the softness of everything, it just like really gentle. Like you just walk out into that into that scene. I just really enjoy how that feels. It's a, really soft and, gentle image, and just the overlapping layers within the scene is just crazy. This one, same thing. What I like about this, and, it goes into the title of On the Rise, is that you just have these layers that are all pushing up towards the top, right? And again, it's really simple, just using overlapping layers with, the light that's there. Another thing that you'll see with my imagery is I like to keep my compositions very, very, very simple. I don't really try to make them overly complex. I just try to make them really simple so that I can just flow through the scene very easily and not get caught up on anything. I think I do a pretty good job of that. Sometimes there might be ways to improve that, absolutely, but for the most part, I try to keep it very simple and very subtle.
If you go back, David, I don't think I've ever seen an image that has such a conglomerate included with the simple, elegant sort of sand dunes themselves. Like normally, whatever's behind it or beside it is got a lot of distance away from it, and it's not deliberately included compositionally because there's almost this competitive aspect of the different substrates and rock types here, and somehow you've managed to include them all together in a conversation. I don't think I've really seen an image like that, actually.
Yeah, well, it's really cool because, like, again, when you're going in tight, with these dunes, 200 to 500 millimeter. I think this is probably at like 450.
I was going to say, it's like 400 or 500. Yeah.
But what's really cool is like, all these lines are just like mimicking each other, throughout the scene, just, causing this nice overlap in depth within it. And I just think like that subtle curve with that light, hitting the dune, just shooting right up into the scene is, I don't know, it's just like a really nice touch. And again, it's just different, it's something different that, I haven't seen before. So, any way I can, make that scene come to life and, just show something a little bit different from the area is a goal for me. And if I can accomplish that, then.
How much was that in the planning, David, like that composition? Because it's a very unique composition. You've got to be a fairly specific place to capture.
I didn't, this is the thing, like with all my dune images, maybe a couple other that I'll touch on later on, but for the most part, a lot of this is just instinct. Like when I get out into the dunes, it just feels very natural to me, very organic, right? And again, like I told you guys earlier, I make a bunch of images from the dunes, and some of them are better than others. Some of them I like the way it flows, and this is just one of those images where I'm like, okay, I like how everything is looking. I'm gonna shoot this. I'm gonna shoot it a couple different ways. I actually got another version of just, the dune itself with the light on the curve, in the foreground. But it was nice and it was cool, but I felt like this was a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
And David, when you're managing the depth of field in your images, do you focus stack at all, or you just do single captures, or how?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I'll touch base on that. I touch on that a little bit later too. Is that like with a scene like this, I didn't focus stack, and I did because like the background is hazy. It was kind of windy on this day, so I didn't really care about the background being sharp because the light is going to fall off in the background. I want less contrast back there anyway. So I don't really care too much about that. I think this one was just like a regular one shot at like f8, but any of my other dune images, like I said, we'll get to, all those are going to be focus stacked because, they're with the long lens and, there's just multiple layers within the scene. Like this right here would be a focus stacked image. This is kind of cool because you look at this, you can see the little whips of sand just kind of blowing off the top of the dunes. And again, it was because we got that nice soft light, but then you just got this glowing background that just really, I don't know, it's just that contrast in colors. I'm a real big fan of hard contrast with colors and light. Yeah. So in the case here, you just have this amber looking mountain, with this late afternoon light, and then that nice pastel dunes. It's a hard contrast, and anytime you get that hard contrast, it always gives you that depth, right? So with this scene, Again, it's something different, and I hadn't seen anything like that. So with that contrast, you know, I had, it's like, that's like almost like a no brainer for me. Like I needed to, you know, I needed to process this and try to make that work. And I think that
it harks back to what Paul was saying with the previous image, that it is very quite unique. We don't see images like this very often, and it's quite brave to marry that pastel look with that harder contrast look in the same image.
Good
I
point.
mean, you could block the bottom and you could block the top, and you'd have two
different images, right?
different
Exactly.
images, and both of them would work. Both of them would work in their own right, but to actually marry those two together and be successful, I think you've done really well. It's really different, and that's what we like to see. There's something
unusual marriage
the box.
Unusual marriage of Hue and Hue as well.
Yep.
In terms of that kind of bluey gold in the bottom and the magenta sort of hues on the top, that's not an obvious color complement, but it still works.
I think it's something different, and I appreciate that. Like I said, I remember, like I told you earlier, like I just want to do different stuff, you know, stuff that's not necessarily, you know, stuff that we've seen before, because I think that's going to be the stuff that's going to be unique and what's going to stand out. You know, it's going to be, you know, be the test of time of imagery. So here we're going to get into more the multiple layers, that nice deep depth into the scene with these dunes. And each one of these dunes that you'll see here, each one of them is going to be focus stacked. This is a scene that I've actually tried to shoot multiple times over the years. And the composition was a little bit off. And I'll be honest with you, with this particular image, I'm not 100% sold on it, but the way it flows is nice. I love the light and shadow play here. The thing I don't like is I don't like this dark edge in the middle of the frame. Now, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, I would say probably 99.9% of the time, I wouldn't even have used this. But the light was just so nice and smooth with that warm, cool transition in the shadows. I had to use it because it's just so smooth. And this is being really critical of my work, and which I always am. And, you know, even when I critique other people's stuff, most of the time I wouldn't have even processed this, but it just has a nice flow to it. And I think that there's enough interest with all the light that's going on that it doesn't really get caught up with that line in the middle, my opinion. But I just really like the way the light and shadow play here was just interacting throughout the dunes. This is a scene here that took me a very long time to capture. I went back multiple times this year, back in 2019. There was thousands of footprints, you know, in this image. The first time I tried to shoot it, thousands, from people doing workshops and you know, just back to back workshops. It's like it looked like little dust spots on every single one of those dunes. I got lucky, and you can see a little bit of wind movement in here. It's a bit like the little top of the dune, but it was actually pretty windy on this morning. So when I came, everything was nice and clean. The other thing that's really cool about the scene is if you notice on all the edges of the dunes, they're all nice and sharp. So when you have sharp edges like this, you can tell that there was just like a recent dust storm. All the edges are just super sharp and crisp. You don't really get that too often. So to see all those sharp edges within the scene is really, really, really nice. And then again, just with the multiple layers, it's just like an ocean of dune just going out into infinity. Here is a scene here. Again, dust action, really windy out there. Just the multiple layers here of, you know, light and shadow play. I mean, it like literally zigzags from front to back. And then you just got this, you know, one person out there kind of, you know, doing whatever they're doing back there on that peak.
It's like Jared with his 500 mil.
Yeah. This actually, I think, was taken at about 400 millimeter as well. Again, just really compressing the layers. And again, you can see here with these nice, sharp, textured ripples in the foreground, with the wind just really sculpting those dunes, a little bit. You can see a little bit of the dust picking up here on the right. But yeah,
David, are you getting that dynamic range in a single capture? Or is that?
Yeah, I just one frame shot. That's it.
It's a big dynamic range in one image.
Well,
what
Nikon, Paul.
I know. Yeah, 50. David.
Yeah, but the other thing too, though, Paul, is a lot of my images I tend to underexpose. I probably shot this super dark and just lifted the shadows. I find myself, I actually don't blend that much anymore, to be perfectly honest with you. A lot of my stuff is just one shot captures, and I just open the shadows. This is a scene here that I just took this past spring. And what was funny about this is this lone dune out here had the sweetest curve in it. So nice. Just hiding out in the dunes all by himself. And this was actually a kind of cool scene because, I've shot in these dunes many times. And every time I go, I find something different. And this is one of those scenes here where you just have this nice flowing curve right in the center of the frame. And again, warm and cool tones in the shadows, which I really like. And, again, the overlapping zigzagging layers leads up to the curve. I mean, this a winner for me. Really enjoy that. This is another one that, which I've shot this back section of the dune field a handful of times. And this pyramid, series of little pyramids here, are only sculpted after a nice strong windstorm. Most of the time, these dunes here are like rounded off. It's like mounds. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the landscape changing over a period of time. And this is a perfect example of that. So those shapes are only there after a nice big storm, a nice, wind event, and really sculpts those dunes accordingly. So, that's one that I could probably go back to maybe next year, and it won't even look anything remotely close to that. So, again, playing off the lines and the shadows here. Again, it's very abstract. You probably can do a million different things with compositions here and crops and whatever else. But again, it's, about the shape. What I really like here is I like this hard light and hard shadow, in the midground. And then you just kind of have like these subtle shadows in the background that show
that's the most intriguing part of the image to me personally, David. It's really hard to place that background at all. And the image is utterly striking without it. And then it introduces this really bizarre kind of play on perspective and depth and what that could possibly even be. It makes it feel really otherworldly.
Yeah. That's and again, and that's one of the things too about the dunes, Paul, is just having fun with the compositions. I'm not, it's again trying to be different, right? Just trying to come up with something that's a little bit more unique and a little bit different, and have fun with it. The light and shadows does all kinds of different stuff to the landscape. So, being able to play with that and manipulate it a little bit, I think is a good thing, for the art of it.
You're just about to answer my question. I was like, have you ever leaned into more daylight-based work? I've seen a lot of photographers actually lean into that more. And open themselves up into the broader kind of time of day in terms of looking for compositions as well as those utterly soft light. Have you just avoided it like the plague, or have you kind of danced in that realm a little bit? Or
it depends. It depends on the landscape. Sometimes I think hard shadows and strong light is good. When we get to this couple other images down in here, we're going to see some of that. But Generally speaking, no, but I'm not opposed to it. Again, it just depends on what the subject matter is and what the light is doing to the landscape. And, if it's doing something unique, then something different, then, I'll throw a lens on it and see what happens. What you're going to see here in the next few images is going to be the series of all the windy stuff. This is when you're out there and you're getting whipped around with, the sand blowing everywhere and just trying to, get stuff that, is nice and sharp, is a challenge in itself. But what you're going to see here is you're just going to see, these windy dunes. And again, just really, the shapes and, what the light is doing, doing to the landscape. These are just, just the movement. Right now you have the movement in the dunes. And
how do you describe to someone what it's like to be actually out in those conditions trying to photograph? Like, is it easier than possible? Can you only shoot in certain directions because of the impact of the wind? Like,
it's all challenging. It's challenging. You got sand blowing everywhere. If you don't have goggles, you got sand in your eyes, sand in your teeth, sand in your hair, sand in your ears, sand in your gear. We were talking about protecting everything. You can only protect it so much.
Yeah.
But when you do capture events like that, it makes for unique imagery, right? And it's something different. And being able to, compose and just be able to capture that movement I think is something special.
Yeah.
Is there a particular shutter speed that gets that sense of movement, or is it just moving enough?
I usually try to go about 400th of a second. I usually try to, that's usually the range I like to be in. Sometimes I got to go a little bit slower, but yeah, I try to. It's like almost like aerial. You're adjusting ISO and adjusting, shutter speed and, aperture all simultaneously, just trying to, get something that's going to get, nice and sharp. So yeah, it's from
a technical point of view, are you ever shooting handheld, or you're always doing like stacking on a tripod, or mix it up?
Actually, I have been doing a lot more handheld stuff. Some of these windy dune ones, no, I am not going handheld because it is just way too much going on. So I just throw it on a tripod and try to make it work. But, trying to go handheld in here with all that blowing sand is hard. It is really, really, really hard. Getting sand blasted. I mean, that alone is just, it's tough. It's really tough. But again, it shows for some different, imagery when you do capture that blowing sand.
I think the gnarliest thing I had is the Burning Man festival when you
well,
500 foot high dust storms that come in pretty much every single day, and you can only see 10 feet in front of your face, and every dial in your cameras turns into a crunch zone within about 30 seconds of getting it out.
Right. That's pretty much how it is when you're out there on those dunes trying to, shoot the sand. It's just the exact same way, the blowing sand, it just gets everywhere. It's just tough. So what we have here, this next section of dunes is just going to be more high key, bright and airy. A little bit different. You're going to see one of the black and whites that we were talking about, when you're asking about the light and what it's doing to the landscape, and, would I dive into that? I have
David, are you massaging the hue around on these a little bit to move to kind
just
of tone?
just a little bit. Because what ends up happening, what's cool is when you shoot these dunes in nice clean light, and when I say clean light, I'm talking no obstructions, no clouds, just pre-sunrise. The dunes take on a very pastel, lack of color, if you will, in these dunes. So you have a lot of room to kind of play with, how you want to take them. You can go a little bit more blue because they're already cool already. You can, I've seen guys kind of go a little bit more magenta to have it more pinkish, if you will. So there's a lot of room there, when you keep them nice and natural before the sun comes up. It just has you have a natural clean palette to kind of do what you want to do there. So if you want to go warmer, you could. In the case here, I just, was already cool already because there's no sun there. So I just kind of pulled a little bit of that blue out, gave it a little touch of blue, and kind of kept it a little bit more silvery, if you will.
What I like about that particular tone is it could be snow.
Yes.
But it's not, because you've got the ripples in the sand dunes, and so it's a sand dune,
Right.
but it's an alien sort of color to what you're used to with sand, and I think that works really well.
Yeah, there's other places, you can go to White Sands, which I shot, and I have some new stuff coming from there, which the sand is actually white. It literally looks so like white snow. It's such a beautiful place. I now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should have showed you guys some of that stuff too, but it's all good. It's really, really cool to, just kind of switch it up, give it a different vibe, give it a different feeling. And we talk about feeling a lot, and this is one of those images where it just has a different feel that I like. Yeah. Now, here is one of those scenes, Paul, where the light was a little bit harsher, a little bit stronger. And, I could have went a couple different ways with this. I went black and white. I could have added a lot more contrast there, but, I'm not one to go heavy on the contrast. But that is an option that I could have easily done here. But, I try to keep it very monochromatic, just lack of color. So, I think the black and white kind of works here. And just again, the zigzagging and overlapping layers here is just crazy. It's just, it's pretty wild. And that was, look at that, going on, 5 years old now. Now this is one, again, where we could have went any which direction we wanted to go with color. So again, you remember I was telling you, try to keep them, the feel and vibe all the same. Again, we had high winds, super high winds. You could just see like the background of this. You could barely even see anything because there's so much dust. But again, it's the overlapping layers that just, just flow through the scene. There's not any light. The light is very subtle. You don't have hard contrast here. There's no shadows. So again, I'm just keeping it real gentle and more high key, if you will. This is one of those scenes where it's easy to go overboard with the processing by moving sliders a little too much to the left or right. And in my mind, when I see scenes like this, I tend to keep it as simple as possible, right? There's no sense of, really cranking the saturation there because it's not going to make sense. There's no light. So if we don't have a lot of light, why would we crank the saturation? Why would we go heavy contrast? We get contrast from what? From light. So if there's no light, why are we going to sit up there and put a bunch of shadow in there or a lot of contrast in there if it's not there? Now, with that being said, I'm not saying, there's artistic things that you can do there that can make this better or, make it with more contrast and that kind of thing. But for me, it just has to make sense regardless of what direction I go with the image. And this is one of those images. Again, I don't think that the composition is bad. I like the composition, but again, when it comes to in terms of color and contrast, there wasn't much there to add. So, there's no need to, go there. So yeah, those are my thoughts on a scene like this.
Beautifully subtle. Yeah.
Thank you. This real simple. This looks like a bat wing. Looks like Batman to me. That's that's just straightforward. I saw that. I put a lens on it. I said that looks like Batman wing. Snap, focus that onto the next. Goodbye. So this
it just looked so deliberately refined in its composition to the millimeter. Like with particularly with that point in the center to the right. So it has that real feel about it.
Yes. You guys are over here on the side. I probably should have moved you guys over to the side a long time ago, but yeah, you can see that it's, there's nothing cut off. There's breathing room there. I mean, it's very deliberate for sure. The next set of images that you're going to see here is all images that have to do more with the actual, more abstract in nature in the dunes, except this one. This one, again, that golden light, I just have a thing for that golden light, and this one got me, and it's tight. The square cropping camera. Usually I mess this up, but this is one of those times where I felt like it flowed nicely and just got all those little gold tips just going through the scene. Yeah, oh man, this is one of my favorites. I like this.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites, David. I was just thinking that straight away.
Yeah, it's so nice. So mixed textures, exactly what it is. We talked about it, mixing the textures, and, here you got the rugged texture and alluvial fans of the mountains in the far distance, but yet you still have this nice light and shadow play throughout the dunes, and, just kind of creating this, abstract flow just to kind of keep the eye bouncing in the scene. You're bouncing from warm to cool to warm, dark to light. I remember I told you guys earlier on that I love mixing hard contrast in the scene. And when I see hard contrast like this, warm and cool, I always like to tend to play with that quite a bit in the field and in post. Yes. So when I see something like this, I got to jump right on it. And this is one of those scenes that, that was there. Same thing here, hard shadows, bright light, contrast, light and dark, and you just got this nice wavy, curvy dune. And then, you got this subtle one in the back in the shadows, still enough there to keep the eye interested on, hey, what's going on up there? But, again, different, more abstract in feel, if you will. Again, guys, I'm a sucker for gold. I hate to say it when it comes to the dunes. I'm just a sucker for, gold tips and cool shadows. And this is what we got going on here. Gold tips, cool shadows, front to back, focus stacking, in camera crop, aspect ratio is, I love it. Come on, guys. What do we, come on. Look at that. I mean, what do we got to do here? I mean, like,
absolutely nothing, man.
I mean, it's a S curve with warm and cool tones. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I had to shoot it. I mean, and I've shot this curve, a handful of times over the years, but the light this time was just the best. This is a scene here too, where the time of year that you shoot this, it matters. So I shot this early winter, spring, and late winter going into early spring and late spring. And in the middle was right where it was at, to the springtime. Paul over there needs a change or charge his battery.
Nope. All right. That's a fairly regular thing.
Okay. All right. So now we're going completely abstract. This is an abstract image of the, of the Badwater Basin from up top at the one location that we had with the crazy rainbow. I shot it on a different event, but just again, with the salt and the flow from, top to bottom with the zigzagging motion, again, we got hard contrast, dark and light, and it just, just the flow. It's like a really simple, nice, easy flow throughout the scene. It's, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And again, this looks like an abstract painting, if you will. Nothing really special here in terms of color or anything like that. I tell people all the time, a lot of my work is based on, the midtones and midtone contrast and, really focus on tonality. And, I just let it rip and run here. Spring bloom. 2016, if anybody knows anything about Death Valley, it's, one of the lowest places on this planet Earth. You don't get a lot of rain there. So to have this alluvial fan with this the wildflowers blooming in here this is a rare sight. And again, you just got these convergent lines going down into the middle of the frame with this mix of wildflowers. Is, again, it's a special scene. Simple, might be simple to most people, but this is a simple scene that maybe a handful of people are going to have, just because you don't see wildflower blooms like this in Death Valley. So again, this is one of those special images. That
so they just sort of lie dormant for years and years, and then pop out for a short time and then disappear again.
Yeah, 2016. 6 years ago since we've had a really big wildflower bloom down there. So again, that's a rare occurrence there. Now let's get into the sand abstracts. Really, really simple. Again, light and shadow play. Gold edges. I told you guys I love gold tips. But the cool thing about this, again, we talked about it earlier, the lack of scale. This could be an aerial image, easy. Easy. It could look like something that we shot from the plane. But no, this is something that I just shot at my feet. It's right below me. So again, that lack of scale.
Quite convincing in that regard, David.
And again, we talked about it earlier, warm and cool shadows. I love hard contrast, so that hard contrast is really given, that nice depth and space within that scene. Mud cracks, everybody loves mud cracks, right? Yeah. Well, here's the thing. For me, if you guys see me ever take pictures of mud cracks, I always have to have them unique. I see mud cracks all the time out here in the desert, but either the patterns, hard contrast like this, different shades, this is special to me. This is something that's different. It's going to be different than, other, mud crack images that you see out there. I call it this mosaic because, again, it just looks like this mosaic, like these tiles, with these cool colors and patterns. So again, something really different. Man, what can I say? Tones, contrasts, weather cracks, anything that has that peeling effect, I'm on it. I love it. It's something different because you don't get these kind of mud cracks. Paul mentioned earlier about the sun just hitting these cracks for a period of time. That's what you're seeing here. You're seeing extreme heat drying out these cracks that are starting to peel. Over time, you get one gust of wind, all those peeled sections are gone. So then, you're just pulling up the next layer that quick. And then you peeling up the layer of, what's underneath this, right? So the cool stuff is already gone. But here, we got something, something special here. And, again, I just kind of like how this crack is, kind of flowing up through the middle of the scene. And then you got like this, contrast between warm and cool. And, just a lot of interesting stuff going on here with the, the textures of the peel-in mud. So, yeah, I hope I was able to, convey something different there. Yeah. I mean, look, guys, again, the pizza slice, it's a slice of pizza right in the middle of the mud crack. We got pepperoni right in the middle. Come on, like I said, again, it's something different, it's something unique. Has nice flow and it's interesting. You're not going to see that. The other thing that I really like about this is I wonder if this, like the lines that you see here were the movement in the mud, how it was flowing off this mountain. Is this, like a form of that erosion that was, going through that was, with the mud flow, I don't know, but I think, little subtle things like this and the details, very nuanced stuff in in the images. If you really look at it, you pick up a lot of different little details, which in my work, I strive for stuff like that to, show the little details that show up.
If you stay on that a little bit, I think what strikes me about that is that I had to wrap my head around the lighting, because it's somehow it gives this sort of dimensionality and kind of textured, kind of rolling physicality and to it that I wasn't expecting when I first saw it. It almost looks like some of the areas are raised and angulated and drop away in subtle ways.
Yeah,
it's probably in reality a fairly flat scene, but it comes across with a lot of dimension. And again, I love the way you play with scale. I could I could wrap my mind around this in quite different relationships with scale at the same time.
Yeah.
I was also going to mention about the color, the light as well, and if there's a particular sort of lighting condition you prefer for these sort of shots.
Soft light, soft light, soft light for me, like I said, we can go back and look at the, a lot of this stuff like this soft light, this has a little bit more light because you can see here, there's a little bit more shadow and you get a little bit more of that golden light hitting these edges. I remember on this day, the light was actually kind of diffused. So the sun was breaking through the clouds, but I was able to get a few frames off before the light got way too harsh. But yeah, all soft light, all the stuff that I like to shoot, especially with, the smaller abstract intimate scenes, I like to shoot in soft light. Now, you'll get stuff like this, where it's white, right? It's just white. Again, soft light, but I still want a little bit of light to come through just so you can get some of those shadows and those deep crevices, right? Because that's what gives it, a little bit of depth. And again, the salt taking on this weird texture, almost looks alien-like, it's something different that we don't see, but it's, it's interesting to me. It's really cool. And, you can study all of this stuff. And again, could be, from the air, it could be from the ground. I mean, I don't know. It could be a wall,
microscope.
It's just interesting to me to kind of really, really study, the stuff that's going on in scenes like this. Same thing, salt. Is it up high? Is it low? Yeah. But again, just the flow of it, we got, it's almost like this, like it's just fragment and like something dropped into the middle of this. And then the crack just spread out, out into the edges. But again, goes back to the, the processes and how I look at, these scenes with hard contrast, warmer tones, more deep, richer, contrast, and then, something bright. I always look for that hard contrast in composition and the stuff that that I'm shooting. This is another one. It just kind of looks like these pieces of these, I wouldn't say pieces, but these areas of salt. It feels like it's just floating into the landscape.
How wide are you shooting then, David?
So this was actually shot pretty wide. I think I actually shot this about 20 millimeter. Focus stacked, just at a different angle. I took multiple, I actually played with composition on this scene quite a bit. I spent a lot of time here. The light was diffused out to the east. There were clouds. There was a little bit of light coming through, which was nice. It gave me enough to kind of make all the little salt patterns, give it a little bit of light just to kind of make them brighter. But, I shot it a little bit wider. I shot it tighter, but with the wider scene, it just gives it a little bit more of that expansive feel. You know what I mean? So that way it seems like it just stretches out and goes. And that's what I wanted to convey here. Too tight. Yes, you could have got some cool stuff in here, but I wanted to give that expansive feel, to make it feel like it's just going out and going on forever. But again, what do you see here? Going back to the organization of the gallery, we got salt, right? So we got 3 images salt together in different ways. So the next series of images with all sand abstracts. Again, lack of scale, contrast and light, deep textures. Again, man, this just looks like the sand is just vibrating. It's just these repeating patterns that are just going throughout the image that I really like. And the other thing too here is that you get the deeper textures, which you have to really look for these. And usually you don't find deep textures like this unless you have like a really good sandstorm, like some days, before. And, obviously if they don't get trampled up, but like stuff like this, you kind of have to really like search and look for, in this particular scene, it's the same thing. This is actually taken while the wind was actually blowing across. So you can kind of see these little whips of sand coming across here. But again, it's just like this melodic flow that's going throughout the scene and it's just bouncing from left to right. And again, you get that nice, soft, subtle light with these shadows in the, behind it, just giving it that little extra depth. But again, this could be considered, something, from the sky. Again, same thing. This looks more like snake skin, but you got these, these really cool textures. And what was interesting about this image is, so if you look at here, we have all these little curves throughout the scene, right? And the wind is blowing over the, blowing over these little wavy areas in the dunes, right? But what's cool here is we got these other indulgent textures within the little curves, which is different. You don't see that. So, again, this is, stuff that was sculpted by the wind, and, just, bringing out even more textures within, that's already there. So I thought that was, really cool. And again, you just have these, repeating lines. When I'm shooting scenes like this, again, it's about the flow. Again, if you look at each one of these, it has movement. It has movement within the scene with no blockage, just continuously, moving in the scene. And this is cool because it's a small scene, right? It's super small. It's not very big, but yet we can still have that sense of movement in something so small. And, just how you're composing the lines within the scene will make that, make that flow. Because we could have turned this orientation maybe, I don't know, 15 degrees, and it won't have the same look, right? It won't have the same flow. So again, it's about how the flow, how it's, portrayed in the scene. A lot of times when I shoot scenes like this, I'll just get my camera and I just turn the camera looking through my viewfinder and seeing how the flow is throughout the scene. And I'll take multiple images, and usually, Paul, this is a good, going back to doing the handheld, I'll shoot these handheld, right? And then if I find something that I really like, then I can go in and focus stack if I need to. But a lot of times I'm just doing this handheld, just trying to find a good, flow within the scene. Same thing here, leftover mud. Now we're just hitting the last part of this is, we're dealing with mud. And this was leftover mud from those floods that we were once talking about, right? And when all the water dries out, this is what you get. Now, again, this is really cool because it can pass for aerial. It could look like sand dunes, if you will. But again, what I like is, the light and shadow play. I like to play with a lot of the curves, throughout the scene. And, we got warm and cool in the shadows. We got nice light and shadow play. And, and again, it's just interesting, how often do you see anything, like this? You don't. So, again, it's very small scenes that can go either way, big or small, who knows? Same thing. I love this image here because it looks like these lines are just coming out of the shadows, right? Like they're just coming to life as the light is hitting them. And another thing that was cool is, we talked about earlier about the sun really baking this mud. And then you can see that there's all these little divots, these little craters where the sun is just, cooking these, and it's just kind of forming its own little texture. At some point, these little divots will start to curl up and crack, but this is just like the timing of this was just right. Now, if I could have hit these about a week earlier when they were still moist, this would look completely different. But it still gives a different look. And this is another one of those scenes where, it's hard light, hard shadow, and, just giving it a sense of mystery. Like there's, what else is there? What else is coming out of those shadows? You notice in my shadows, I've kept my shadows dark, right? Kept them dark, but yet there's still detail there. So again, just kind of adding a little bit of mystery, to that scene. This was back in 2019. And the last one, sketch painting. This by far is another one of my favorites because, again, just the repeating lines that you see here, that the mud has sculpted all these shapes. And again, it can be big, it could be small, it could look like it's from the air, but no, it's right at my feet. This is really, really intriguing to me because, again, it's a question of what and how the mud formed that, and how these patterns were formed. Was the mud that strong to where this is what the end result of it was? If it's just sitting there baking over, a period of, weeks and stuff, but to get these structures, like this tight structure within this small scene is just, it's really, really, really cool and really intriguing to me. And then, like I said, you got all these little divots and holes and stuff to just adds that extra layer of interest to the scene, if you will. And yeah, it's just something different. And
I feel like we're on part 1 of 16 so far.
Man, I just did a whole breakdown of my whole gallery. I wasn't expecting that, but it was fun and it was different. And, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't.
Well, very, very privileged. And to me, I get goosebumps because this is one of my favorite areas on planet Earth to photograph, and to be over the shoulder of someone with that level of mastery and vision and commitment and time that they put into a landscape is a very phenomenal and rare insight to get. Bloody privilege, to be honest.
Yeah, it was crazy. I don't know if that met your guys' expectations, but it just kind of gives you a little bit of it just gives you a little bit of.
Well, I still feel like we're just scratching the surface of David and who he is, and I don't know if you're open to another one sometime, David. My first thought is as much as this is probably one of my favorite shows we've ever done, and I actually genuinely mean that for many reasons, it's still only just scratching the surface of who you are and the breadth of the work that you've created. So if people want to get a sense of that, just jump onto his website and straight away see we've just seen this tiny microcosm of David's relationship with the American landscape in particular, and who he is. And there's still a whole big conversation I'd love to have about your influences and the culture of photography in America, and going deeper into the curation process and your business for the future and that kind of thing that I don't think we do justice trying to cram into 5 minutes at the end of a show. So if you're open to more down the track, it might be another year away to catch a window. That's fine.
Let me know when you guys are ready for me. Let me know. I mean, I'm around. I am busy, but the summertime actually worked out great. I like I said, it's my downtime. I don't really have a lot of stuff going on. I've been processing a ton. For those that don't know me, like I told you earlier, I have the tendency to hold on to images. So stuff that I shot, say last year, last fall, wintertime, early spring, I save everything for the summer. And then when I get into the summer, I just get into my flow, and then, the creation just starts coming. So
it's simmering away in the background.
I got like, a ton of stuff like you, Paul, like you're saying, just stuff sitting here in another 4 days, I'll be back off to Iceland again. So, I have another handful of images, like stuff that I still haven't shared from last year. So, I got a ton of stuff, just sitting in my hard drive, just waiting to come to life. But, I'll always like to take my time. I'm not in a rush to, put my work out. When I got into photography, the social media aspect of it was really tiny. Right. There was really nothing there for us. So photo sharing wasn't a big thing for us. So, when it came to have a platform like this and being able to share, it's cool, it's great. But again, remember where we started from. We didn't really have, the sharing sites. So, everything was just kind of to your friends or an email or word of mouth, or, if you're fortunate enough to, get some stuff printed, great. But that was not really like a big deal to me. So having this medium now to be able to share the work is cool, it's great, but it's not my main motivation. So for me, I can take my time and hold on to images for quite a while, as you guys saw earlier in the show, and even with this gallery, I can hold on to images for a while and just try to make it all flow later on, and something cohesive.
So David, you're involved in quite a bit of image critiquing sort of work going on, and is that consistent or just comes up and goes? Is there a way people can engage with you that way?
Yeah. I mean, it's getting, well, before I go into that, one of the things that I will say for anybody listening to this and anybody that watches this, if you guys really want your work to go to the next level, get your work critiqued, plain and simple. It'll help you learn and see stuff a lot differently than what you may not have thought of in the past. And it's just good to just, somebody that has like really detailed eyes and, shoots a wide range of landscapes, and, you trust that person to give you, good advice, do it. It's really beneficial. If you would like to get more involved with that, feel free to, reach me across all social media, David Thompson Photography, davidthompsonphotography.com. Just, Google me. I'm out there. Send me a message on Instagram. If you're on Facebook, I'm on there. That's really it. Send me an email. But yeah, we are, it's been picking up. It's been picking up a lot. A lot of people are starting to get into the critique thing. It's starting to become a thing now. And it's really, really beneficial, for anyone that's looking to do it.
I think what we saw today, we're obviously gone a fair distance with this one, but I think what we saw today from what you've presented to us, David, is a real passion and knowledge of a subject that is A, close to home, and B,
Sure.
close to your heart. And we've seen the result of that. And I think if there's a lesson that people can learn from this is you're not doing with a project like this, you're not jumping on a bus with a whole bunch of other photographers and jumping out and at an iconic scene and taking a photo and then leaving again. You're going time and time and time again. You know the dunes almost like personal friends, and each area, and you know when to go because you've been there before and you've seen how things change. You know that the wind does this, the season does this, and all those different aspects. And it's those aspects combined with your artistic vision and talent combined that have given us such an amazing gallery that you presented today. And I think if there are people up and coming that are getting into landscape photography and want to learn anything from this, it's find something and go back to it and revisit it and see it in every different aspect and learn about it. Learn what that plant is and why it's special. Learn, what the wind does in this area. Learn what the light does at different times of the year, and keep going back to it. And by doing that, you're going to get the sort of results that you've got.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and thank you for that. Now, don't get me wrong, you can make trips. For example, like I went to Iceland last year, and I had a productive-ish trip. The aerial stuff that I did there was great. I think that's, and you guys have experienced, some of the aerial stuff. Yeah. If the conditions are there, it's going to be high yield as long as your settings are right. You can get your compositions dialed in. That's pretty good. The landscape aspect of my trip was decent, but I know that there's more potential there. Right. So I didn't feel like releasing all this new work, from there, because I knew that there is more potential there. So I'm just going to hold on to it. When I go this year, hopefully, it'll be a lot better. And wife, please forgive me. I can go nuts now because we weren't together. I can just let loose and do what I need to do with no distractions and, that kind of thing. But it's what you make it. And it's a mindset. If you have the mindset that you want to do something different and you want to approach something with some meaning and have meaningful imagery, and I'm not by saying my work is completely like that, but it's there, but it's a mindset, right? And you have to have certain expectations for your own work and what you want to present. Again, that's probably easier for me to say because I've been doing this a long time and I'm very clear on what I want to present, to the public. So again, that might be a little bit easier for me to, to say, generally speaking, but if you want it, it's there. But again, it's your mindset. What do you want to do with your imagery and how do you want to present it, is what it comes down to. And, if you're focused and, willing to, sacrifice some things and realize that, it's not going to go great every single time. You're not going to get everything that you want on a visit. Maybe you've traveled thousands of miles and spent thousands of dollars, purchasing tickets and rooms and cars and planes and all that stuff. But that's, part of the risk, right? It's risk versus reward.
Yeah.
And, in this medium, that's what you do if you really, want to be good and, have and make meaningful imagery. That's what it takes. It takes a lot. And sometimes it doesn't pan out exactly the way you want it to. But, again, it's your mindset. If you're willing to fail, awesome. You're going to be good eventually down the road, but you got to be willing to, take that risk.
Thanks, David, for coming on the show, taking the time and giving us such a deep and powerful insight into a curated body of work. Like few people would ever get a chance to witness, and being the first people to see it is really the icing on the cake for us. So good luck in Iceland. Be well, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Likewise, guys. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks for everything. You guys are great. And like I said, whenever you guys are ready to do it again, let me know. Great conversation. It was meaningful. I like I said, I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Absolutely.
Likewise.
See ya. And catch
All
you
right,
later,
guys.
everyone. Till
All
next week or next fortnight. See
Talk
you
to you
then.
soon, David.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right, be well, gentlemen.